Hey guys, I want to introduce myself real quick before getting to the content of this video. I'm Paul, and I'm relatively new to the YouTube platform experience. I used to do roller coaster videos a few years ago under a different platforming name, but I thought I had really switched gears upon my return to the YouTube experience. So I want to start off by saying I'm not really big into playing video games, but I particularly love the game Mario Party Superstars. I used to play Mario Party as a kid and would always have so much fun with my friends staying up late and getting into all kinds of crazy games. When the new Superstars edition came out on Halloween 2021, I decided to play a game with my friends just to try it out, and it was just as much fun as I remember it being when I was younger, but there was a catch. I started to notice this time around that there was so much strategy and analysis that could be implemented while playing through the board that I never realized as a kid. I started playing more consistently and really began focusing on board strategy and all the different decisions to make in different situations. I became so invested in this over the past 2 years that I decided I would give this a shot and make a video on some of these strategies. So everyone, here is my best shot. I wanted to start off real basic today with item shop strategy. What item to buy at the item shop and why, depending on the situation. And today, I'm going to be focusing on the board Horrorland. So just as a brief overview, Horrorland has 3 item shops located here, here, and here. Each one contains the same collection of items. The collection of items includes one list in the first half of the game and a separate list in the second half of the game. So without further ado, let's get started. So starting off, the first item shop you'll be passing is most likely this one down here. This is, of course, assuming that you don't choose to go up this way and warp up to the top of the board, which is a very bad decision with 0 or only 1 item, but I'll get into that reasoning in a separate video. So unless you have 2 items, specifically the ones that help you up at the top, from 2 lucky spaces in this early path, which is extremely unlikely, you're going to be passing this item shop first. Now, your strategy when passing item shops should remain fairly simple throughout large stretches of this game, particularly in the first half. So let's pull up the list of items and talk about it. There are only 2 items you should really be looking at any given moment, and that would be the double dice and the skeleton key. Now, this isn't to say that these other items don't have value. They certainly do in various different situations. The problem is that they have very little value in creating a cumulative and sustainable plan. Each one of these other items can be really helpful in a single turn move in which you need to shift momentum or really change the dynamics of the game. But the problem with this is that unless things are getting unusually out of hand, you shouldn't really be looking to do this in the first half of the game. Let's look more in depth into each item and the benefits it can provide, and then we'll get into why the double dice and the skeleton key are really the only viable options. The first item is the mushroom. The mushroom provides essentially the same function as the double dice in terms of it not only being an acceleration item, but a smaller scale acceleration item as opposed to the triple dice. The main benefit with the mushroom as opposed to the double dice is that it provides a minimum roll of 6, whereas the double dice provides a minimum roll of 2. The disadvantage, however, is that the top end of the range is not as high. You only get a maximum of 15 as opposed to the double dice, which provides a maximum of 20. More importantly, the average range for the mushroom is between 9 and 12, whereas the average range for the double dice is between 7 and 15. This added range in the upper half of the confidence interval is really important to playing towards the aggressive nature in which this game requires. Yes, you will dud and hit a 4 every once in a while with your double dice when you really need a 6, but you'll also hit a 12 more often as opposed to a 9 when you need an 11. The mushroom is the most defensible option of the other items because it at least provides the same type of advantage as the double dice, but let's move on to some less defensible choices. The next option is to get the cursed dice block. This item is a really bad item to buy at an item shop because you're wasting your trip to the item shop in which you can buy a better item. While this item clearly has a better value on a board like Woody Woods because of the condensed areas of event spaces, this item does not have as much value on a board like Horrorland. If you buy a cursed dice block, there's very little likelihood that you're going to be using it right away, and also very little likelihood that when you do use it, that you'll actually cash in by hitting what you were hoping to hit. To explain this in further detail, let's first look at two different ways in which you would use a cursed dice block. The first way to use it is offensively, by cursing yourself to try to land on a beneficial space. This use generally provides only a 33% success rate because there's only a 1 in 3 chance that you'll hit the specific space that you're looking to hit. You could try to use it in specific stretches in which all 3 spaces provide some sort of upside, but the odds of you landing on a space in which all 3 of the spaces in front of you provide that specific upside is very unlikely, and not something you should be generally planning for, specifically in the early part of the game, when you should be focusing on more simple strategies like accumulating stars and positioning yourself to take advantage of King Boo. The second way to use this item is defensively, by cursing one of your opponents so that they don't reach a specific spot on the board. One glaring weakness with this plan is that if they have an acceleration item, like any acceleration item, such as a mushroom, double dice, custom, or triple dice, then they can simply use it to completely negate the effects of the cursed dice block. But let's say you're in a situation in which they don't have one of those items, or they're in a position where it would be bad for them to use this particular item. The next problem with this is that when you play defense, you can only play it on one of the other 3 players. This not only limits the effects of the move, but in many situations, it actually opens the door for other players to take advantage and benefit on the same or following turn. Let's say that this isn't the case and that another player won't benefit, or that playing defense against that specific player will be highly beneficial because they're a major threat at this point in the game. This is still a bad situation to plan for by buying the cursed dice block at the item shop, because you can instead simply use a double dice to benefit yourself and simply match them or jump in front of them, and in both cases separate from the other 2 players in the game. The last item that's involved in the first half of the game on the item shop list is the chomp call. This presents many of the same problems as the cursed dice block, but in many cases worse. First of all, the price is 7 coins, as opposed to the cursed dice block, which is only 3, and the skeleton key and double dice, the items that you should be buying, which are 3 and 5, respectively. The second main flaw is that there is no specific offensive benefit to this item. Yes, you can theoretically chomp the star closer to yourself, but you do not get to choose where the star lands, and because you have already used the chomp call to move it, you can't then use a double dice on the same turn. Another player is then likely to use a double dice to grab it after your turn. You would have to be lucky enough to chomp it in an area within 10 spaces, and still then you'd have to be extremely lucky to hit that roll. The one defensible spot to use a chomp call for offensive purposes is when you're down in this area over here, because you have a 2 in 7 chance, which is only 28%, by the way, of it landing within a realistic roll of getting it, either here or here. But even then, it's not guaranteed. Also, I noticed that I said use and not buy. Yes, you can use it in this situation, and it would be considered a decent move. But the odds of you landing in this spot and having the star be in a position in which the double dice wouldn't be more beneficial for you to use is unlikely, and not something you should be planning for by buying this item at the item shop. You should be buying items that are consistently usable in a variety of situations that would benefit you on any given turn, and not items that you really have to wait to use in specific situations. The other main problem with the chomp call is really more a problem with playing defense in general. Again, when you play defense on one player, it often benefits the other 2 players. Let's look at an example. Let's say that the player whom you are using the chomp call is on this spot, and the other 2 players are here and here. If you chomp the star at this moment, yes, it moves away from this player, but it also can move closer to this player or this player. You have to wait for very specific situations in which the chomp call hurts the opponent that you're looking to hurt and does not risk benefiting either of the other two players. And even more specific situations in which it additionally benefits yourself to where you would want to bypass buying a double dice or a skeleton key. The last problem with this is that because of the way the board is arranged and how the star portals are set up on the board, the star being moved may not set the player back that much anyway. Let's go back to this example. If the player you're defending against is here, and you chomp the star from this location, there is a 2 in 7 chance, again 28%, that it will land either here or here, which are still within reach of this player having a double dice or triple dice. In the end, this is just bad planning, and what I would call being too cute when you could and should be maximizing your opportunities when passing item shops by buying very simple offensive items directly geared towards more immediate use and more sustainable outcomes. Now that we've talked about the disadvantages of the items you shouldn't be buying, let's look into the advantages of the double dice and the skeleton key. The double dice is a good acceleration item with the highest upside available to you during the first half item shop list. Simply put, it is your best way to collect stars in this first half of the game. Using them in the best spots is also important, but I'll create a separate video explaining that in more detail. The skeleton key is also beneficial to you on this board because 2 of the 4 boos, including King Boo, are behind gates which require a skeleton key to open. You'll primarily want to be saving your key for the King Boo gate because of the value it provides towards the rich star, as well as your overall bankroll, but it can also be beneficial to use it in different situations at the other gate. These 2 items are just the most simple and easy to use to develop your equity throughout the first half of the game. So which one should you buy first? Well, the answer is pretty simple. In terms of basic strategy, you should be buying the double dice first because being able to accelerate through the board provides the most value. The answer does become a little bit more nuanced when you break it down into each specific item shop. This item shop over here, for example, is a no-brainer double dice purchase. Slam dunk. The reason for this is that you're not remotely close to a gate, so buying the key here without a double dice is just useless, and the only way you could get to a gate without passing another item shop in which you could simply buy a key along the way is if you decide to warp here to the top of the board. Doing this with only a key and no acceleration item is bad planning in terms of getting to King Boo, so you shouldn't be doing this anyway. There is, of course, the scenario in which there's a Bowser Shuffle, or a warp block being used by an opponent, but these are rare occurrences and not things for which you should be specifically planning, so the bottom line here is buy a double dice at this item shop. The next item shop to focus on is this one down here. With this item shop, again, assuming you have neither item, you should still primarily be buying the double dice first. The reason for this is that you'll still want to be prioritizing acceleration, and you most likely aren't going to want to hit this debut this early in the game. Now, there are some exceptions, which is why I use the word primarily. One obvious exception would be is if you're down 4-0 in stars and you have over 100 coins, a quick star steal in this situation may help you get back on track. But most of the time, you're not going to want to go to this boo and especially not prioritize it over acceleration. So really, you should be getting a double dice and then be making your way up to this item shop in which you can then buy a key. You can also plan on getting a key here because you're not going to go to this item shop up here and you're planning on going this way to King Boo instead, but this is stupid for all kinds of reasons, so let's just move on. The last item shop to focus on is this one up here. This is the only item shop in which either choice is almost equally defensible, Now, in reality, your goal should really be to preserve your double dice from this item shop down here so that when you get to this item shop, you can purchase the key and then you'll have both to prepare for King Boo or still be able to get a star along the way if that opportunity presents itself. But let's say you don't have that double dice. I get it. Things happen. There might be a star up here or down here that you wanted to make sure you collected. So now you're at this item shop and you have neither the double dice nor the skeleton key. Which one should you purchase? Personally, I prefer to get the key in this location. Sure, you'll have no acceleration item to work with at this, but at this point, going along this stretch specifically in the first half of the game, where you should be focusing on building equity, a key is probably your best bet because it is the only item that will get you to King Boo. You'll just need a little luck with the day-night switch, and who knows, maybe you can pick up an acceleration item along the way by landing on a lucky space or an item space. Now, with this being said, I can still defend the decision to get a double dice here as well because it still does provide the overall best value, and it may help you get a star in this area, which is especially helpful if you're focusing on star chasing. So now I want to move on to the list of items that will be available to you during the second half of the game. There are a few notable changes from the list of items available to you during the first half of the game. There are 3 new items available, including the triple dice, custom dice, and the warp block. The other change is that the mushroom and the cursed dice block are no longer available. So, similar to your strategy in the first half of the game, you should be primarily buying a skeleton key or the now upgraded triple dice. The other item that should be in your rotation is the custom dice block, but you should generally be prioritizing the triple dice and the skeleton key ahead of the custom dice. So why are the other items bad? Well, let's get into it. First off, do not buy the double dice here to save money. You'll end up sacrificing way too much value. Even if you only have 10 coins, use all of them for a better investment. Ultimately, it will take roughly the same amount of time to get into a position where you'll be able to use the acceleration item to collect a star or use it in another beneficial way, and the upside once again will be far better. This is essentially the same explanation for why to buy the double dice over the mushroom, and I feel that it holds true here as well. Now, if you don't have 10 coins at the moment and you already have a skeleton key, then yes, you can consider buying the double dice. But even in this situation, you may just want to wait and not buy anything. With so few coins in your pocket, your options for using a double dice to your benefit aren't that great. You may be better served buying nothing and then picking up a triple dice on your next item shop trip. The warp block, similar to the chomp call or the cursed dice block, is an item that is based on waiting for specific situations, and unless you get very lucky to have all 3 players in a highly advantageous position, you're most likely just waiting for a situation with positive odds, where the negative outcome or outcomes could really put you in a disadvantageous position on the board. There are certainly beneficial ways to use a warp block if you happen to acquire it in another way, which is another video I'll be making in the future. But it is not a valuable choice to acquire at the item shop in exchange for a better item. To reiterate the point that I made earlier in the video, you'll have much more control over your outcome with the triple dice, the skeleton key, and the custom dice, because these are items that are more frequently usable, and they do not require nearly as much luck to pay off. In the case of the skeleton key and custom dice block, using them does not require any luck at all to pay off. The most interesting item that is available at these item shops is perhaps the custom dice. Simply by cost, this is the most valuable item that will be available to purchase at any given time. It is not, however, the best item to purchase at any given time. The obvious limitation with this item is that you can only travel a maximum of 10 spaces. In a game that is primarily based on collecting stars, this does not provide the necessary range that you would need to accomplish this when compared with the triple dice, which has an upside of 20 spaces more and an average of 7 spaces more. This is the main reason you should be purchasing the triple dice most of the time over the custom dice block. Aside from collecting stars, the triple dice will help more with collecting coins as well. Getting through King Boo will be easier if you have a triple dice and are 15 spaces away, provided it is already night. In most situations, you can just wait an extra turn if needed. Now, having to wait an extra 2 turns is where the custom dice block begins to become a little more valuable than the triple dice because of the ability to land on this event space and change it to night. But you still then have to wait an extra turn and hope that nobody turns it back to day before your next turn. You don't encounter this problem with the plan that incorporates the triple dice because you'll be able to use it and pass King Boo on the same turn. This concept applies to the other 3 boos as well. The value of the skeleton key over the custom dice block is implied because of the fact that King Boo and an additional boo are behind gates. The one way in which a custom dice block will be better for collecting coins than a triple dice block is if the bank is full of a lot of coins. This is again a situational principle, and it requires that you check the amount in the bank before making this purchase. The minimum amount that the bank should be holding for this to be a good purchase is not purely scientific, but remember that you are spending 12 coins already on the custom dice block, so unless you're rich star hunting, which is not necessarily a bad thing, remember to subtract 12 from your profits. This is the reason that using a custom dice block on a lucky space is not a great move, unless of course you're being creative during endgame, because the maximum amount of coins that you can receive on a lucky space is 20, and in most cases it is less, with the average being around 10. In my opinion, the minimum amount the bank should be holding would be 37. This is close to the average that you'd be receiving from King Boo, and it would still be a plus 25 in profits. Just remember, the downside of doing this is that you're sacrificing board position. In the case of a triple dice, you can use it to multitask by passing the spot on the board that is beneficial to you and then moving closer or even passing an item shop again. When you have to use the custom dice block, you are not passing the spot but landing on it, which means you have to use at least 1 additional turn, if not more, to get yourself back into a more advantageous position on the board. In the case of using it to land on the bank, particularly this one and this one, you will be several spaces away from the next item shop. This is assuming you don't have a triple dice in your pocket, of course. If you do, then you'll only be sacrificing 1 additional turn and you should be fine, provided once again that the amount of coins in the bank is sufficient for the purchase. Another way in which the custom dice block is valuable is that it can be used to land on an event space. Now, if you're kind of new to the idea of Mario Party, the classic format, which is the way the bonus stars are arranged in the original Mario Parties, which is an option to play, and the option I usually play in the Superstars version, the event space, which the event star rather is belongs to the person who lands on the most amount of event spaces throughout the game. So landing on event spaces when playing with the classic bonus stars is very valuable. You should be very careful with this strategy. The custom dice should never be bought with the specific intent to use it on an event space on the following turn with no additional upside. The reason for this is that you'll once again be winding up in worse board position without the added benefit of passing an item shop. This is in contrast to how you can use this strategy in Woody Woods, in which the tree will allow you the option for an additional dice roll, but this is not Woody Woods, and these same benefits do not apply. So in the end, you will just finish your turn without the additional upside. This is just bad planning and not maximizing your value effectively. This is especially due to the fact that when you have an item in your pocket, it can stay there for an unlimited period of time, unless someone has a plunder chest, which they don't sell at any item shop on this board, and thus are extremely rare for an opponent to acquire. Or the other scenario is if you receive a 4th item, then you might have to throw an item away, because the game will require you to throw an item away if you receive a 4th item, because you're only allowed to have a maximum of 3. This is where the concept of forking comes in, or what I like to call forking. And it's the first additional value situation in which a custom dice block can or should be used. Forking is what I like to call when you have 3 items, you're about to pass an item shop, and you use one of your items for the dual purpose of gaining a specific advantage with that item and clearing up space to buy a new item so that no item has to go to waste in the process. This is an essential strategy in maximizing your value. With that being said, you have to make sure that your bankroll is sufficient to fund the purchase of an additional item in that moment, as well as the use of your item being actually beneficial for you in that situation. In this example, provided your bankroll is good, the upside of using a custom dice block to land on an event space in a situation where you have a triple dice and a skeleton key alongside it is good because getting an event space is a strong benefit, and you also clear up the space to buy another item, most likely a new custom dice block. This principle of forking should generally be applied to when all of your items are strong, because you can usually dispose of weaker items and be fine, but there are situations in which you would fork with a weaker item in your pocket as well. Another way to get dual value out of your custom dice block is to use it when the star is near and there is an event space following it, both being within 10 spaces. This is a +1 in the star column, as well as a +1 in the event star column. You should be wary about using a custom dice block on getting only a star for the same reason that you would be wary about using a custom dice block on getting only an event space. There are obviously endgame situations in which you would perform either of these moves, but we'll get into that in another video. Another way to get dual value out of your custom dice block is to use it on an event space before any of the 4 boos. If you'll notice, there is an event space located directly before each of the 4 boos. Using your custom dice block to land on one of these spaces to turn it day or night, depending on which boo you're at, and then planning to steal on the next turn is an excellent way to get dual value by getting an event space and then stealing coins or a star on the following turn. I would caution you to watch out for other players who may have a custom dice block and be inclined to use it directly after you to land on an event space of their own. You would then, in this case, only be getting single value from your custom dice block by landing on the event space, but not being able to steal coins or a star. The last way to get dual value out of your custom dice block involving the event space is to use it on defense on another player. This is done by landing on an event space to change it night or day so that the other player can't execute a specific move, whether it be passing boo or passing a womp. The womps don't move at night, for those of you who are less familiar with this board. This should really be a move saved for a situation in which one player is in a clearly more threatening position than the other 2 players, seeing as how playing defense, in many cases, only accounts for one of your 3 opponents. I say all this to say that there are less frequent situations in which you should be using the custom dice block compared with a triple dice or skeleton key, which is why you should be buying these 2 items first. Once you have a triple dice and a skeleton key, the custom dice block should be your next purchase. Try to avoid purchasing a second triple dice unless you are heavily star chasing. The reason for this is that once you have one triple dice, you will most likely be able to purchase another after using it by passing another item shop on the way to whatever else you had used it to chase. Very rarely should you buy a second skeleton key. There's just rarely a situation in which you'll use 2 skeleton keys on the same turn, especially without passing an item shop in between. There is an endgame principle in which you can use 2 skeleton keys on the debut in this corner after hitting a large number with a triple dice, but this should really only be applied to your endgame strategy and thus not the main purpose of this video. We'll again get to that in a future video. I feel like I've been saying that a lot. But just to exhaust that theme further, there will be a future video on how to go for items in an item game. This will really just be for the items that are different from those sold at the item shop. Otherwise, you should be applying the same principles described in this video to the item game. Lastly, I want to return to this item shop up here. If you'll remember earlier, I said I prefer to buy the key before the double dice at this item shop during the first half of the game. For the second half of the game, this strategy should reverse, and you should be buying the triple dice over the key, unless you have specifically just used a triple dice and have rolled enough to get to King Boo on that turn, which is pretty unlikely. There are a couple of reasons for this. One reason for this is that the triple dice simply adds too much of a surplus value over the key when compared with the double dice, and thus buying a key when you don't already have a triple dice is just not capitalizing on your opportunities. The other reason is the difference between the first and second half of the game. The first half of the game is generally slower paced because triple dice aren't yet available, and it isn't as easy to quickly collect stars. Because of this slower pace, you can afford to purchase a key with no acceleration item and be mostly fine slowing down a bit in the hopes to capitalize on a King Boo trip. The second half of the game is much faster paced, and your opponents will be collecting stars at a higher frequency. To keep pace with them, you really can't afford to slow down for several turns just to try to capitalize on King Boo. The value of that single King Boo trip will not make up for the value lost by slowing down in this stage of the game. Also, as we've discussed earlier, there's no guarantee you'll even get there during the night. Furthermore, you may be in a situation where the rich star is no longer wide open, or at the very least not guaranteed, even with you successfully passing King Boo during the night on this trip. So while the answer was to take the skeleton key over the double dice in the first half of the game, the answer now reverses, and it is much better to take the triple dice over the skeleton key in the second half of the game. Well guys, that's all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Stay tuned as there will be similar videos coming up involving the other 4 boards, as well as other videos regarding various areas of Mario Party strategy. Thanks everyone, I'll see you all next time.